All right, welcome to this explainer. If you've ever looked around your organization and felt completely overwhelmed by how things actually get done, or, let's be honest, how they don't get done, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving into Guy W. Wallace's Enterprise Process Performance Improvement methodology. It's a bit of a mouthful, so we'll just call it EPPI for short. Now, this whole system is built on one really simple premise. You've got to begin with the end in mind. We're not just going to jump into the middle with generic knowledge or some vague set of skills. No, we are starting right at the finish line with the terminal performance requirements.
So here's our roadmap for today. First up, we've got eating the enterprise elephant. Second, defining performance competence. Third, the 3 analysis tiers. Fourth, the LCS framework. And finally, we'll wrap up with systems, processes, and AOPs. Let's get right into it.
Take a second and really consider this reality of modern business. Most enterprise processes are unnamed, unmapped, unmeasured, and unmanaged. Crazy, right? But think about it. Enterprises have hundreds, honestly sometimes thousands of different processes floating around. Trying to manage all that can feel a lot like pushing a giant boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll right back down again. It literally scares people away from even attempting to fix things. But hey, recognizing this widespread chaos, that is our absolutely crucial first step toward making any real improvement.
All right, moving into part 1, eating the enterprise elephant.
There's this fantastic vital lesson from the total quality management experts back at Motorola in the early 1980s, and it's super simple. Don't boil the ocean for a cup of tea. Obviously, literally boiling an ocean or eating an elephant is impossible, and, highly unadvisable, but the metaphor totally holds up. You absolutely do not need to assess and improve every single process all at once to have a massive impact. Instead, you just segment that giant enterprise elephant into nice, bite-sized chunks. You keep the whole overarching system in mind, sure, but you really only tackle those segments one at a time.
Which brings us to our second section, defining performance competence.
So if we aren't boiling the ocean, what exactly are we trying to achieve with the specific bites we do take? Well, the answer is performance competence. This concept is literally foundational to the entire EPPI methodology. It's defined as the ability to perform tasks to produce outputs to stakeholder requirements. Let that sink in for a moment. It's not just about doing tasks for the sake of looking busy or checking a box. The tasks have to produce a concrete output, and that output absolutely must meet the requirements of the stakeholders.
So that begs a pretty crucial question. Who actually are these stakeholders? Well, the hierarchy is incredibly broad. We're not just talking about your immediate customer or your direct boss. It ranges from society and government at the very top, all the way down through owners, the board, executives, management, customers, employees, suppliers, and finally, the local community. So when we talk about meeting stakeholder requirements, we are really talking about satisfying this entire massive ecosystem.
But how do we actually go about performing those tasks? Well, human task performance is kind of tricky because it requires 2 completely distinct components, behavioral tasks and cognitive tasks. Behavioral tasks are your doing tasks. They're overt, meaning we can actually observe them, count them, and measure them. Cognitive tasks, on the flip side, are the thinking tasks. They are completely covert, basically hidden from plain sight inside someone's head. To achieve true performance competence, we absolutely have to uncover both.
Now, you might be wondering, how does this definition hold up in our modern tech-driven world? Does performance competence only apply to humans? Absolutely not. This exact same requirement applies whether the tasks are being performed by humans, by standalone AI, by machines, or by AI-augmented systems. That fundamental underlying requirement to produce outputs that meet stakeholder needs, it is completely universal. However, here's the catch. If we're planning to use AI to replace or even just augment humans, we can't just program the obvious stuff. For any performance that isn't purely rote or mindless, both those behavioral and cognitive tasks are still required. We can easily program a machine to do the observable behavioral tasks, sure, but we also have to elicit that tacit, hidden cognitive knowledge from actual human master performers. Because if the AI doesn't know how to strategically think through a complex task, it is never going to achieve true performance competence.
Okay, moving right along to section 3, the 3 analysis tiers.
So how do we actually target all this for improvement? Well, we systematically map out the organization using 3 distinct analysis tiers, moving progressively from the macro level right down to the micro. Tier 1 is the enterprise map. That's where we categorize systems and processes.
Then Tier 2 zeroes in on process performance, getting into the nitty-gritty details of specific tasks and outputs. And finally, Tier 3 looks at process performance enablers, which is basically figuring out the specific human and environmental assets you need to actually perform those tasks.
This is really the big picture of EPP in action. It's kind of like a giant funnel. We start way up at the enterprise and department level. Then we drill down into process maps and performance models. From there, we branch out to identify the required human assets, things like specialized knowledge and physical attributes, and environmental assets, like data, tools, and company culture. Finding the deficiencies in these specific areas is a real game changer. It helps us pinpoint exact performance gaps and calculate the cost of non-conformance. And honestly, that's what gives us the actual hard ROI for all of our improvement efforts.
All right, that brings us to Section 4, the LCS framework. To make that Tier 1 enterprise map actually work, we need a reliable way to organize all of those processes. And that is where LCS comes in. It stands for Leadership, Core, and Support. We essentially categorize every system and its associated processes into one of these three buckets. What's absolutely vital here is understanding the distinction between shared processes, which are typically your leadership and support processes, and unique processes, which are your core processes. Let's try to make this a bit more concrete. Think of a shared process like the annual budgeting process. It's technically owned by the finance department, which is a support function, right? But it is a process that is shared and used by absolutely all the other functions and departments across the entire enterprise. Defining what is shared and what is unique, or even just what should be shared, provides incredible utility when you're in the trenches trying to organize performance requirements and identify those pesky gaps.
And finally, Section 5, Systems, Processes, and AOPs.
If we work from the bottom up, right at the base we have our AOPs, or areas of performance. These are basically just clusters of outputs, tasks, and roles. Now, when you chain those tasks together to produce a worthy output for some downstream customer, you get a process. And finally, when you bundle a bunch of logically related processes together, you get a system. So, simply put, AOPs bundle up into processes, and processes bundle up into systems. It's kind of like building blocks. To really ground this in reality, let's look at a classic corporate function, the financial system. It's not just one big monolithic thing, right? It's actually a bundle of very specific processes. It includes things like annual budgeting and forecasting, capital allocation based on expected ROI, record to report for the monthly close, order to cash, procure to pay, and of course, internal audit and controls for things like Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. Every single one of these is a unique process. And each of those processes can then be broken down further into areas of performance and ultimately down to those very specific cognitive and behavioral tasks we talked about earlier. So, look at what we've done here. We've gone all the way from the overwhelming complexity of that massive enterprise elephant right down to the highly specific, actionable tasks inside a single financial process. By adopting the EPPI methodology, by focusing on true performance competence, using those three analysis tiers, and logically grouping work with the LCS framework, you really can transform your organization. So, here's my question for you. Are your enterprise processes still unmapped and unmanaged? Or are you finally ready to take the first bite? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.